So I think we just witnessed the best episode of this season. Now I know we still have the finale coming next week, but for me, unless something crazy happens next week, I don't see anything topping this episode. This particular episode is called The Price. And I love how it started out back in 83 in Austin. And this is when Tommy and Joel were kids. Apparently, Tommy did something foolish and he knew he was going to catch a beat down when his daddy get home. He said, "Man, I'm going to get the belt." And Joel was like, "No, you won't. Just go to your room. I got this." And so when his dad comes home, Joel is sitting there at the table. Dad said, "Hey, I got to be back on the shift at 30 minutes. Go ahead and tell me what happened." And Joel started telling his daddy a whole lie. And his dad just let him do it. In this scene, you start picking up on the fact that Joel has always been bad at lying, and he's also been bad at reading the room. Anybody with the spirit of discernment would understand that if somebody says, "I want to hear the story from you in your words," they already got the information that they need to know to sink you. So before you start telling that lie, you got to make sure it's going to hold up. And so the dad went ahead and cut him off. He was like, "Listen, I already got the information from this person, and that person. What I think is Tommy went to buy some drugs and you went and laid hands on somebody." And he was like, "Had I not been a cop, both of y'all would have been in juvie." And knowing that he was caught, Joel had to pivot. So he said, "You won't hit him." And at first I was like, "Oh my gosh, you bucking your dad? If he's violent like that, I don't know what's about to happen to Joel." But then the dad surprised him, handed him a beer, and sat down and talked to him for a second. And he told him a story about his granddad. And he was like, "I didn't tell you that story about when I was a kid and I stole that candy bar." He said, "First of all, your granddad made me take it back to the store." And then he said, "When we got home, didn't even get that far away from the car. Buddy broke my jaw. Mama thought I was dead. Had me speaking through the wire like Kanye for like 2 months. I was totally embarrassed and everybody knew why it happened." And Joel said, "If you know how it feels, then why?" And he said, "Listen, I know I hit you and Tommy, but this ain't that. And I hope that when you have your own kids, you'll do it better than me." Now, I do understand where his father is coming from. I think a lot of times parents give you what they have, what they came up with. Some people do the same exact thing that their parents did. Some of them go the complete opposite. I grew up in the 80s too, and people used to get spankings and whoopings or whatever, but then some people got beat. And I grew up with some people that were like, "When I have kids, I'm never going to do this to them." So he knows he's doing less to them than his dad did to him, which he would perceive as doing a better job than his dad, which it is. However, when you're looking at it from Tommy and Joe's perspective, they never received that treatment from granddad. So to them, what you're doing is traumatizing. And just in that opening scene, it was a lot of information being shared because you got to see the side of Joel that was always there. You got to see the protective side of him. You got to see the brave side of him. And listening to his father, you got to see why he does some of the things that he does now. So then we fast forward to the Jackson days. And I love how they showed this time in Jackson because it lined up with pivotal birthday moments for Ellie. So they'd only been there for 2 months and it was Ellie's 15th birthday. And Joel trades some Lego blocks for Seth's grandkids to get Ellie a birthday cake. He also asked for a bone so he could carve it down and place it on the guitar that he was crafting for her. This brother's craftsmanship was crazy. I was like, "Oh, so my man been in the shop." I noticed that while he was building the guitar, they had a close-up of his watch. They also had that same close-up of the watch on his dad back in 83. So I'm guessing there was some level of understanding of his dad. He probably always loved his dad, but he probably has more of an understanding and appreciation for him now. And so he put all of this together while Ellie was away from the house and he was tuning the guitar, kind of playing it a little bit. And then Ellie comes in. Tommy rushes her in. She's drugged up. She apparently burned her arm, but it was on purpose because she really wanted to wear short sleeves. And I thought she was playing a few episodes back when she told Dina that. And I was like, "Well, shoot, go ahead and get your shirt stand, sis. You earned that." So she wakes up and Joel surprises her with a birthday cake. Even though Seth's spelling was all the way off, because who is Eli? I know he's trying to spell Ellie, but maybe next time y'all gonna have to write it down for him. He probably low-key did it on purpose because you made fun of his profession at the time. Because he said, "I wasn't always back here cooking and handing out drinks and stuff." He said, "I used to be a cop." But anyway, Joel turns around. He's trying to find a knife to cut the cake. And by the time he turns back around, Ellie done snatched a whole handful of cake, just acting like a whole wild thornberry. And it's funny because I have a friend who has like a growing list of reasons why he doesn't like Ellie. Meanwhile, I'm thinking, well, she didn't really have a normal childhood. She's not in a traditional family with Joel. And I think they're both trying to figure out how they navigate in this space. They seem to be in a really happy place during this time. Joel also surprised her with the wonderfully crafted guitar for her 15th. And because she had a handful of cake, she couldn't quite touch the guitar just yet, but she did ask Joel to play and sing her a song. And I just knew that Joel was going to play the same exact Pearl Jam song that Ellie played when she was in the auditorium in Seattle. It was based on her reaction to when she first started playing the song, because she only sang one line and then she shook her head and kind of put the guitar down. It was like she couldn't get through it. So now we know why. And then when you get to the 16th birthday, I guess it really was a sweet 16. He took her on a great adventure. First of all, she got to stand on top of a motherfucking dinosaur. Secondly, she went to the museum. Now, with or without the apocalypse, this is a really good birthday gift. And on top of that, since the apocalypse did happen, you can go into the museum and touch everything you want. You can break glass, nobody will say anything to you. She got to play around with a planet display. She got to climb in a real shuttle. She got to pick out her own helmet without anybody stopping her. She got to have an imagination. This was clearly the best birthday gift. She got to leave the Earth's atmosphere, get into outer space, and then come back to land. I love the simplistic way that they decided to show this. It looked like they just changed the lighting, but as we all know, nothing ever works when we want it to work the way we want it to work. So it could have been way more complicated than we know. And Joel was like, so I did a good job? And she was like, are you kidding me? She was too hyped. And you could tell that Joel was so happy to do that for her because he even had a tear running down the side of his face. So you could tell that his love for Ellie ran deep. Now, on the walk back, this is where a little reminder came up for Ellie. She was walking behind Joel as he was talking about how they should spend more time together. This was really fun. And something made her stop in her tracks. And I'm like, what is she looking at? I saw a big tree trunk right there. I was like, am I supposed to get something from this? Is it a shape of something else? But then what I didn't realize until I rewound it is that she was looking at something much smaller. It was actually fireflies. I was like, oh, the universe is talking to her on her 16th. It was saying you still have some questions about what went on in Salt Lake with the fireflies because the math ain't mathing with the story that Joel told you. So don't forget that. And so for her 17th birthday, Joel came home with that chocolate cake. But when he walked up to Ellie's room, he heard some people in there. And he didn't know who was in there. So he was like beating at the door like the cops. And then you hear Ellie in there cussing because she clearly wasn't expecting Joel to show up. So when he popped in the room, he saw her like buttoning up her shirt, Cat as well. He was like, you need to leave. And Ellie was like, what are you doing here? He said, man, I went and got you a cake. But then when I get up in here, you doing all kinds of teen stuff. You getting tatted up, smoking reefer, and experimenting with girls. I was like, ooh, Joe, you could turn the disgust in your face down just a little bit after saying that. And Ellie got them all the way together. She was like, I'm not experimenting with girls. And he didn't pick up on that last birthday because he was asking if she and Jesse were a thing. She was like, I'm good on that. He had no understanding of what she was into because he never asked the question. One of the hardest things for people to do is just ask, what do you like? Instead of assuming that they already know. So that night while Joe was in bed, Ellie went down to the garage. She was looking around, checking out the space. She was like, this might be the space for me. So Joel is woken up by her trying to move her mattress out of her room by herself and move it into the garage. But she didn't get very far because Joel got to her room before she even got it out of there. And he was like, what are you doing? She said, well, I need my own space. And he said, first of all, it's not habitable at the moment. Secondly, it's raining like crazy outside. And I think the time that they spent apart after that blow up earlier allowed him to kind of like let some of that information sink in on him because the conversation was much calmer. And he came and looked at the tattoo. He talked to her from a more accepting and understanding space. He said, I do think you need your own space, but give me a couple of days to fix up the garage so it's habitable, and then we'll get you moved in. So 2 years go by, and Ellie is now 19 years old. And you see her in the garage. She's sitting on the bed. She's practicing her conversation that she's going to have with Joel. It's questions about Salt Lake City and that Firefly situation. So apparently it's still weighing on her. But her practice is interrupted by Joel, who knocks and says, for your birthday, I'm here to take you for your first patrol. So she grabs her things and they saddle up. They're out on the first patrol. This happens to be the safest trail they have. So Ellie is absolutely bored. But then they get called into a sticky situation. It's involving the infected with Adam and Eugene. So I was like, oh, now we get to see what happened with Eugene. So they ride over to the scene, hike down, and find Eugene. And when they first got there, Ellie was about to walk closer to Eugene, and then Joel was like, oh, whoa, whoa, did you get bit? He was like, yeah, and showed him the bite. And Joel was about to shoot him right then and there, but Eugene was like, I have about an hour before I turn. Can you at least take me back to the outside of the gate and then bring Gail out at a distance so I could just talk to her? He had some things he wanted to tell her. And Joel said, I can't do that. That's against the rules. And Eugene said, yeah, you can. And then he pulled out a gun, but the gun was clearly in an empty state. Ellie was trying to advocate for Eugene, though, because she said, hey, stick your hand out, hold it steady, count to 10, reminiscent of what she had to go through when she was with Marlene and they kept thinking she was going to change after she got bit. And she also had that experience with her friend who got bit in the mall, and she changed after a certain amount of time, but she didn't change immediately. So she has a very different experience with the infected than Joel does. So once she recognized that Eugene could count to 10 and hold his hand steady, she said, yeah, he does have about an hour left. So Joel, let the man go see his wife. And Joel said, okay, go get the horses and meet us at this point. We'll wait there for you. And then Ellie backs up a little bit and kind of stares at him like, I really don't trust you. And she got what she needed out of that situation because he said, I promise. And then he gave her that look, which allowed her to gather some information. So while Ellie goes to get the horses, Eugene and Joel take that walk. And Joel decided to lead this man to the water. And it was a gorgeous scene of nature. However, Eugene recognized what the situation was. And Joel told him, don't even turn around, boss. And at that moment, Eugene knew that he was never going to see Gail's face again. And Joel told him, you can always see a person that you love. So he had to envision her in that spot. And Eugene said, I can see her. And shortly after that, Joel ended it. And to me, that wasn't really a good look for Joel because Joel actually did have time. He refused to listen to a person who had more experience in this situation than him. And at this point, it was actually Ellie. Because as far as I know, he's never sat and watched somebody change. He's not a doctor that has studied this. The closest he had was Tess, but she blew up that building really fast. Ellie actually saw her friend change. He already had it made up in his mind that he was going to do this. And he lied to Ellie again. And you still lack the ability to read somebody when they're saying, hey, I don't believe you're telling the truth right now, which is why you had to say, I promise. See, when I was growing up in the church, they used to tell us not to swear. What they said was, let your yay be your yay and your nay be your nay. If you got to do all that extra work to make somebody else believe you, then something's wrong. So when Ellie pulled up and saw that Eugene was dead, you could tell that that just broke her. She was riding back in silence. She was crying. She couldn't even look at Joel. Meanwhile, Joel is doing all the talking. He's saying, I'm going to tell Gail what she needs to know, and that's it, because that's the right thing to do. And even though she's silent, he could tell that Ellie's not feeling what he's saying. Joel said he didn't have a choice, which was absolutely a lie, because you're trying to find a way to justify things like your dad justified beating y'all. So they get back to Jackson with the body, and Gail walks up and she's distraught as expected, but then Joel starts to speak, and I wish he hadn't, because he told a few lies. First of all, he said that Eugene didn't want to come see her because he didn't want to infect her. Then he made up what Eugene would say to her because he never said, hey, tell her I love her. And the last straw was when he said he self-eliminated. Now, at first, Gail threw herself into his chest and cried because she didn't have all the information. But then an eruption of truth came forward from Ellie. And she said, that did not happen. Eugene begged to come see you. He promised Eugene that he would bring him back. He promised both of us. And then Joel shot him in the head. Joel was flummoxed. And then he tried to say something to Gail, but Gail smacked him and told him to please go away. And then he looked back at Ellie, and Ellie said, you swore. She harkened all the way back to the finale of season 1 and the beginning of episode 1 this season. And I'm glad I watched the making of this episode because one of the guys that was writing, he said they were very intentional with Ellie saying you swore instead of promise, because promise is this situation with Eugene. But he swore that he was telling the truth about the Fireflies at the beginning of this season. So now we have a better understanding of why Gail said she hated him. And we also have a better understanding of why Ellie was so mad at him, because he actually ruined her 19th birthday. He could have told the truth, but he chose to lie. Joel didn't have to do Eugene like that. If he was going to kill him, he should have just killed him while Ellie was standing there. I guess he thought he was protecting her, but she didn't ask for protection. And she saw the dead body anyway. Eugene wanted his wife to be the last person's face that he saw. He said, I need her last words for me. I'm about to die. I'm absolutely terrified. Now, if he wanted to give a counterpoint, we could have said, had he turned to an infected while he was over there by Jackson, he could have called other infected to Jackson, which is a risk to their safety. Had he turned, he could have turned into the smart infected. We don't know. So 9 months later, we get to the New Year's Eve party. And I really like that they changed the perspective that we see it from, because now we're seeing things that happened that night from Joel's perspective. So we eventually get to the part where Seth calls out Dina and Ellie for making out on the dance floor. And he was mad disrespectful because he went out of his way to call them the D word that rhymes with bikes. And of course, Joel swooped in like the savior he wanted to be, and he wanted to protect Ellie in some kind of way. So, elder abuse ensued. Let me see you toss at the... And this time when we hear him ask Ellie, are you okay? And she says, what's wrong with you? We have more context. And she said, I don't need your effing help. And he said, right, and then walked off. Now, I don't think she should have talked to him like that in that moment. However, I think a lot of stuff has been bottled up for some time with her, so she had to let it out in some kind of way. And they were both embarrassed at the event. So when we get to the scene on the porch at the Miller house, After that New Year's event, I was completely unprepared. I've never played the game or read any kind of source material, so I had no clue what was coming. And I actually appreciate that because I would have had a totally different experience with this. It's the scene we all saw in episode 1, but this time it got extras. And the extras did everything I needed them to do. So instead of Ellie walking past Joel and going straight to the garage, she returns to the porch. And then they have that conversation that they've been needing to have. The conversation that she told Gail didn't happen. I don't know why she lied about that. Maybe she didn't want Gail in her business. Then she starts talking to Joel and she says, I had Seth under control and I don't want to ever hear about you taking me off patrol ever again. This is her trying to tell Joel, hey, I'm in the driver's seat of my life, not you. You've been doing way too much. And Joel said, okay. And then they had a little quick conversation about the Dina situation. And Ellie was like, it's really nothing. I don't know why she even tried to do that. And then Joel tried to say, well, she would be lucky to have you, which is a very nice thing to say, but Ellie was not here for that. She called that man a donkey. She said, you lied to me with the same face. And I was like, this is the moment that she's been waiting on for like 4-5 years. And that's when she said, I'm going to give you one last chance to tell me what happened with the Fireflies. If you lie to me, we're done. And then she asked, were there other immune people? Were there raiders? Could they actually find a cure? And he gave her the truth. And then she said, did you? And he shook his head, yes. She was like, including Marlene? He was like, yes. Mind you, there's tears all over that porch. And what he said to her was, in order for them to find a cure, they were going to have to take your life. And she said, then I was supposed to die. Then my life would have had a purpose. But you took that from me. You actually took it from everyone. Now, throughout this episode, we've been seeing the moth, right? Early in the episode, Joel asked her what that meant. And then he even went to Gail to figure it out more so. And Gail said that the moth actually means death. And when Ellie was moving into the garage, she picked up some of her artwork and it was a drawing of moths. And there was a line written on it that said, you have a greater purpose. So it seems like she was thinking her life would have had greater meaning had she saved the world. And Joel took that from her. And I actually think adults took that from her because I'm not sure if Marlene gave her all the information of what was going to go into her actually making this sacrifice. And if we're being honest, Ellie has not been a child most of this series because she had to grow up in a violent and dangerous world. Even though Joel tries to infantilize her, she's done too many adult things. You can't unring that bell. She literally had to sew you up after you got stabbed by raiders. She killed that creepy cannibal guy. Her childhood has been gone, and she was not a replacement for Sarah. And so, yes, she's really upset with Joel because he took that choice from her. And he said, yes, and I'm going to have to pay the price for this because you're going to turn away from me. But if somehow I had a chance at that moment, I would do it all over again. And she said, because you're selfish. He said, no, because I love you in a way that you can't even understand. And I was like, my brother, I've been waiting on you to say this the whole time. Now, she was mad, but I know that meant a lot to her. He said, maybe you'll never understand, but if that day shall come that you have one of your own, I hope you do a little bit better than me. I was like, oh, not you sampling your daddy. And then Ellie said, I don't know if I can forgive you for this, but I would like to try. And I'm glad they got to have this conversation because at first I was like, so Joel died and y'all just left stuff on the table? But now seeing this conversation gives a bit of closure to the situation. And maybe that's the reason that Ellie was talking to Gail in that way when she was trying to get discharged from the hospital. Ellie didn't have regrets because they did in fact have that conversation. And she knew exactly what he meant by I saved her. So it seems like she only told Gail the truth one time, and that's when she was mad at Joel. That was just to punish Joel. That wasn't to really tell Gail the truth. So Gail was right in not trusting her because she is in fact a liar. Ellie was mad at Joel for lying to her specifically, but she's turning out to be the same exact person. And I understand where Ellie's coming from because he lied to her multiple times, and these aren't just small lies. These are major lies. And even though he never placed a hand on her, I'm pretty sure those lies cut her pretty deep. Which is why she said, I don't know if I can forgive you for this, but I'm willing to try. And I know she believed that her purpose was to die for the cure. But maybe that wasn't her purpose at all. Maybe her purpose has not been revealed to her yet. Because let's be honest, if it was meant for her to actually die for the cure, Joe wouldn't have made it to the room in enough time. That's usually how it works. If it was meant to happen, it will happen. But her life still matters anyway, and I feel like she has a bigger purpose down the road. So for the last scene, we done with the flashback in Jackson, and now we in current day Seattle. And we see Ellie walking in the rain to that building that she and Dina were staying in. So my question is, how will she act in the finale, given the fact that she does have a baby on the way with Dina and Jesse? And even though she's not the bio mom, she will want to be a good parent, which is probably why she keeps trying to tell Dina, hey, we can go back if you want to, because she wants revenge on Abby and her team, but she also wants to be a good parent to that baby. The issue is you can't have everything, so she's going to have to make a choice. She's definitely going to have to make some changes internally, otherwise she's going to be a terrible parent. Because when you become a parent, the children come first. And right now, Elle is in her selfish space. So her walking to the building was the end of the episode. I really feel like this was the best episode of the season. The acting was flawless per usual and emotionally engaging. The set design was impeccable, like when they were talking about making the constellation on the Science Museum wall out of velvet and like rhinestones. Crazy. They also rebuilt the solar system. The writing was top tier. Everything was perfect. What do y'all think of the episode? Did I miss anything? If there's anybody that's watching this that played the game, what do y'all think of the episode? Comment down below, hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell for future content. As usual, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.